far as the collective, okay, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order.
How are you? Thank you, Mayor. So I'm actually going to turn it over to our team to go from County Road Commission. They're going to go through a presentation, answer some questions, and we'll discuss next steps from there. So, guys, turn it over to you.
Thank you. Appreciate you giving us the opportunity to speak today. My name is Gary Petrovic. I'm the Deputy Managing Director of the Road Commission. Today, I have our Director of Engineering, Sam Fitzer, and our Programming Supervisor, Mike Smith, will begin the presentation on our behalf. I think we can just get right into it. We'll just get right into the best, because I can put a lot of questions. So hopefully we can answer anything you need to know about where we're at right now, and where the next steps are in this project.
Thanks, Gary. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sam Fitzer. I'm the Director of Engineering with the Road Commission of County. And you know, we're here first to introduce a little bit of a quick update on where we are with the environmental assessment with respect to Southfield Road. As some of you may know, this environmental assessment stretches 4 miles in length, right? So crossing multiple jurisdictions. So quite a major undertaking, especially for a road commission or a local agency to take on such a massive project in general, or even an environmental assessment. But we are ready to talk about next steps and what that might look like beyond just the environmental assessment. But as you see on the slide, you know, this environmental assessment, not just a major undertaking, but it's taken quite a bit of time to get through. It's been decades since the Road Commission has been interacting with everybody, right? In terms of like the village, Southfield, et cetera, et cetera. It's just meetings and iterations of the design and various alternatives that we've studied and evaluated. And now we have the latest drafts. It's always a draft version until FHWA kind of gives the final blessing, right? And so the latest draft was submitted earlier this year, and FHWA has provided comments earlier this year, and it has been quiet ever since with respect to FHWA. Some of that is due to the ongoing between the administration and the federal government, but we did hear some feedback from MDOT more recently in the year, essentially mentioning that FHWA and MDOT is not reviewing and providing us additional comments and to be able to get to the next step until we are ready to get to the next step, and we decide what that looks like. right now, this project, the Southfield Road project, is in our regional transportation plan. It's a long-range plan, if you will, in terms of letting the folks know, letting everybody know that we have a vision for a project within Southfield Road between Mount Vernon and 13 Mile, but no real set plans in terms of taking that next step, starting our preliminary engineering process, starting the actual kind of meat and potatoes of the engineering work, if you will. Now, the part of that feedback from MDOT and FHWA is that they won't provide their feedback and get to that step of a public hearing and get to the next step of ultimately approving it until it's programmed in our TIP or in the Transportation Improvement Plan, which I guess in their minds tells them that this is a real project to us that we want to take to the next step. It being in the TIP ultimately means to them that we have plans to actually take it to start the engineering process, and at the very least. Now, with respect to the TIP itself, we can program projects. We can program it in terms of programming the actual engineering of it, but without programming the actual right-of-way phase or programming the actual construction phase. So we can break up the phases, if you will, within the Transportation Improvement Plan as 5 phases. But a little bit more of that, so, Michael talked a little bit more of that of what our idea is with respect to next steps. So that being said, that from the feedback from MDOT and FHWA saying they won't talk to us and approve it until it's in the TIP. In order for us to we can put it in the TIP, but we also need all the other communities on board to support that next step. And Mike will explain a little bit more what some of our options look like. Mentioning that the environmental assessment overall included that 4-mile stretch. We're here today, in terms of that's a lot of an undertaking, right? So one of our proposal and our option that we think is to kind of take smaller bites of the apple, if you will. And so, in the environmental assessment, and also kind of shown on this slide, is it broken up into 4 different segments. This also speaks to it in 4 different segments within the actual environmental assessment report. Today, part of our focus is focusing on segments 1 and 2. So from Mount Vernon going north of just north of 696 a little bit. So focusing a little bit more on segment 1 and 2. Now, as we get into it a little bit more, just to provide context of this being a massive undertaking, just rough order of magnitude of a project this size, rough order of magnitude, we ballpark this in the $200 million range for this entire stretch, right? And so when I say that this is a massive undertaking for a local agency to take on, it truly is. This is a in terms of, we're talking about a mega project in a sense from beginning to end, from Mount Vernon to 13 Mile. So smaller bites of the apple, right? Segments 1 and 2, and I'll ask Mike to kind of dive in a little bit more of what that looks like, and ultimately, right, the goal of that environmental assessment of what we're envisioning for Southfield Road is, some people can just say, it's boulevarding that segment, but ultimately with some goals in mind and some purposes that Mike will kind of share if I dive right into it.
Thank you, Ken, for having us. Yes, so the purpose of this project, as you see, is as we looked at it over the history of the time that we've been studying this for the last 2 decades of courses, we're all concerned with most communities as to improve current traffic congestion and future traffic operations, and they look out to the year 2040. And you'll see in that figure that is kind of, depending upon where you're at within the program, as you'll see in a later slide, it will become a boulevard that is planned in some areas will be 6 lanes. That's just figure. Doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to look exactly, but that's just to give you kind of an optics that you can kind of see what is there. traffic congestion and safety problems, of course, which we know, which are expected to worsen. It is a heavily traveled road, a major thoroughfare that we have in the community. And so looking at the project, we want to accommodate all modes of transportation. Just when I travel down here, you see that we have bicyclists, pedestrians, automobiles, and transit. We do have transit locations that are also part of that, so we have to consider those things when we're looking at this. And it's truly to provide a context-sensitive solution and consistency with all the local community plans we've had over the last 20 years. And the biggest thing when we look at these projects is to improve connectivity and safety. That's the main thing that we always look, our director always talks about safety in our roads. We want to make sure that for vehicular traffic, pedestrians, and that all transit that we are within these road segments, that we're improving that along the corridor. And we know that this is a major corridor that we have on the county, so that is one of our main goals. And of course, then, along with that is improving the aesthetics of the corridor to help with development, which that's what we like to say, is that one of the community looks at that. We have a boulevard, the aesthetics are really improved with that. We're really, establishing that new look that we have, and it also, coming from my background experience in local government, you want to think about, this also provides you a wonderful opportunity for each community that are all involved in this corridor is to investigate and improve your own infrastructure. Because as we're ripping it up, as we're going through all these things, you can look at your water mains, your sewer, all these things, and kind of, because if the road's already there, that's your time that you can really look at. So focus on, it gives you an ample time during the design phase, which could be years, to really look at your own capital planning and see how you can kind of work that into this plan to really help with that. So when everything is done, you know that for the next how many every years that that investment is, that everything that's underground as well has been worked on. So the next slides are showing just kind of the preferred alternative that are in the EA, the current draft that's submitted. So that is segment 1. So you can see in the green, that would be the boulevard, that would be the suggested alternative that we have currently that was submitted in the EA, just to give you kind of an overview of what it would look like. And then I believe the next one is 1 and 2. It's in your slides as well that I printed out for you. That's just showing you what is actually in the current, that is being reviewed by the FHWA right now as a preferred alternative. There's other ones that are in the EA that I shared with the manager that if you want to see it later on, you can see other ones. These are the preferred alternatives that are showing what it would look like, specifically to these 2 segments that Sam spoke about, segment 1 and 2 that we first want to play off. If you next slide. So what we have, as you know, was alluded to. It's a heavy lift. So the size and scope of this project are, of course, beyond the typical funding streams available to all local agencies. The high-level estimate, including all preliminary design, right-of-way, construction, and construction engineering, is approximately $50 million per mile. And as was stated by Sam, the whole entire estimated cost of this project is $200 million. RCOC itself, we've applied for numerous federal earmarks without success. We've investigated numerous funding loan options, any different things that we can kind of see out there, and we were not eligible for them. And so what we're seeing as the best option is to move forward with the EA that has been submitted to request funding through the Oakland County Federal Aid Committee. And so the best approach, again, is to start with segment 1 and 2 that we talked about, which is Southfield Road, south of Mount Vernon Street, Cambridge, and Southfield from Lakewood Village. And really focusing on those segments with the biggest issues. And it's providing continuity from where the freeway currently ends. And it really has a logical ending point as a great starting point that we'll get with this. Next slide. So with that, with those 2 segments, the estimated cost is roughly $100 million. And the way we work with federal projects is we do an 80-20 funding split. So the $80 million targeted estimated from federal funding and $20 million in local match. And so the local match would then be split 50-50 between RCOC and all the local agencies based on your frontage of what you have per that roadway. So the local share, if we're saying $20 million, RCOC would have $10 million, and then we'd split that between the city of Southfield and Lakewood Village. We see that as a very heavy lift. That's $3.75 million that Lakewood Village based on your frontage. And so what we're stating is that we would want to do the PE phase, which is the estimated cost. So we get FAC approval to reallocate what's already in their plan for 2027 to go towards the PE phase. And with that funding breakdown estimates, we can see that it'll be about $6 million, federal will be 4.8, local will be 1.2. And so we would take 601, then it would be split up, and so your cost for the design preliminary engineering would be $222,564. So that would be to start on that design phase, as we were stating that we can utilize. And then this is just showing some other things that are showing. So currently we'd have to look in the other segments to do further funding, where we'd have to look at and maintain other things for right of way and construction. We'd be working with, we have other funds that are available through the FAC, with Federal Transportation Economic Development. The TEDF funds, the Category C funding, would be available starting later years for construction. So again, we're focusing on the PE that you guys can utilize to get this project moving. That's the biggest thing, and really focusing on segment 1 and 2. And then 3 and 4 would be later, to the later dates, and the breakdown of those phases, funding and funding years would be determined at a course of later date as we move forward. So, of note for you as Latham Village, some of you have been on council for a while, maybe are aware of tri-party funding that is available. I gave you a little printout snapshot. So currently your reserve that you have is $377,578 in your tri-party funds that you are eligible to allocate. You receive approximately $40,000 per year in those, and you can allocate your tri-party reserve funds to cover the PE phase. So the city can borrow, of course, we do allow that with some other projects. You can borrow 3 years in advance to go towards future costs. So you could have an addition, you have basically between the next 3 years, you have about $500,000 eligible that you can utilize for this. So you would be able to, with that, if you look back at what your cost was for the PE phase, $222,000, you do have tri-party funds that can fund that to get this rolling. So I just wanted to let you know that. So the next steps, the big key that we need from RCOC is we need a resolution by the city council confirming the PE phase in your project commitment and acknowledging the responsible ability for the required local share by January 6th, so we can get it on their agenda to us. And then we would add the PE phase request to the FAC agenda for approval at their upcoming January 20th meeting, knowing that we have Lathrop Village's commitment. And long-term commitments as well for construction can be made once the PE phase is underway, and once we get through that, and that will give you ample time over the next, here we are coming up on 26, you have quite a few years to figure out, discuss how we can get to that funding with construction in 2030, 31, somewhere in there. We believe this proactive approach, many years in advance, does allow you that time to investigate and plan for other infrastructure improvements as well. I believe we'll be coming up on budget sessions. You can talk about capital planning and other things like that. You can investigate other methods. Again, we always want to note that these are estimated costs and local share, not actual costs. We always want to say that, but we like to say it's $200 million. We never know once we're in there, but we want to be fully transparent with where we're at with that. And these are just to provide a starting point for planning purposes. So, and of course, we will always continue to seek funding opportunities, including other grants and earmarks as they come up over the years. And we, again, same thing with you, advise you as local communities to reach out to your respective elected officials to see if you can get them on the radar, maybe get an earmark. We know next year is an election year. After that, who knows? They might see some of these as great projects that they can take on and do their earmark spending. So we like to do that. That's kind of wanted to throw it all out there. If you have any questions, the 3 of us are here to answer them.
So the loan options that you guys investigated, so they're completely exhausted?
Yeah, there's several different ones. There's state infrastructure banks at the local level as well as the federal highway level, and either our projects were too big, or we weren't. A number of different reasons why we didn't meet the requirements of them. At the end of the day, they're probably also at a higher interest rate than we can get on a loan that we would get locally here, because the county being triply bonded, you get a better rate than actually the rate that one of them was given. One of them was like 5 or 6%. I mean, we probably get around 2 or 3 or something if we go out. So it didn't make no sense.
And the same thing for the federal earmarks. Did you guys get like feedback from? What were they saying about the project?
Federal earmarks are highly political, and no matter what they tell you, you gotta take it with a grain of salt. They gave us a number of different reasons, but none of them seemed pretty valid, to be honest with you. And then we submitted it again, and they gave us different responses next time. It's just it's a highly political thing, but the hope is, once you're in the PE stage and going forward, we know more about exactly what we're doing in numbers. As a group, we can go together to our politicians and political people, and maybe it gives us a better advantage at that point, when it's a more solid project to look at. We were kind of guessing on a lot of things when we were submitting it, and that was one element they didn't like, was it wasn't a real project yet. So they're concerned if they give us money, does it really turn into a project or not? They're not sure.
Was that the raise grant you were referring to?
Raise and build, right, in both of those. And additionally, the federal highway bill, which lasts 5 to 6 years typically, ends next year, or end of this fiscal year, October of 26. That's when a lot of the earmarks get redeveloped into the new funding bills and stuff, so that'd be a time for us to, again, go after them, and if we go all together, we'll go after those as well.
And what other city has already agreed to it? Has it really?
Southfield's the only other city, and they have not, we just had this meeting a couple weeks ago, so they have not gotten back to us yet either. So.
And why did this stop not going towards Beverly Hills?
What's that?
I remember it was supposed to go all the way to Beverly Hills. What happened? That it's not.
The environmental assessment, the whole project still goes there.
Okay.
But we're just trying to play it off a smaller piece right now. $200 million, very hard to do. $100 million, hard, but not as hard. We do eliminate some of the risk involved in future funding, and we're gonna have to borrow against future funding in a way on the category funds. And the less years we have to go on the future, the less risk we'll have going on.
And they're not listed in here because we're only talking second ones.
Right.
And Southfield, I believe, is bringing it back to their council as well to discuss it.
How long do the EAs last? Because it seems like we've done these repeatedly.
It lasts a long time. Again, it's a difficult process. In fairness, they tend to, because they take a long time, boards change, leadership changes along the time in the multiple communities, and you get different impact and different feedback as you go. The federal government continues to change, so when you submit things, then they ask for new things. And the one thing about environmental assessments is you may start under a certain set of rules, but at any point they can change them. And they continually change environmental rules. So you may have submitted something, they go, now you gotta do, you did A, B, and C, but now you gotta do D, E, and F, because we just added to it, so you gotta resubmit all that work. Then you start doing all that work, and they go, well, you know, A, B, and C's getting old now, so you have to redo it. It's a horrible process from a time frame. It covers everything, which is important, but it just takes too long, and that's part of what the federal government's trying to minimize that time frame, but it takes a long time. It's not unusual to be 10, 15, and 20 years on an environmental assessment.
And what happens if either Southfield or Lathrop says no? Is the project dead, or is it does it go on hold to be reinstated in another year if the two cities would agree on it? So what's the outlook depending on what the two cities do?
Yeah, if we don't move ahead without the locals involved. We really use all community projects. We don't partnership projects. We do not go in without everybody in there, so it doesn't move. And if we don't move to this next step, as was mentioned, we will not get the EA approved. So they won't give us the final, so the EA will be sitting out there. So say in a year or 2 or 3 years, you say, we want to redo this, then back the EA will be too old, and we have to redo the EA again, and it's not gonna take 20 years, but we have to reevaluate a bunch of items, bring the traffic up to speed, things of that nature. And it's gonna take some time, probably 3 or 4 years to get it going again, once we stop it. So we're in a kind of a sweet spot right now, either we're going or we're not. The important part being is the commitment to the EA in the phase 1 and 2 doesn't commit us any further. In the old days, you were committed to go. We are not anymore. So this will give us a better, if we can do this PE phase, we'll get a better understanding of the impacts in the corridor, a better understanding of costs, and we'll be in a much better position to share and understand what we're funding, and get a better idea of how much funding we need, how many years, and how we can line that funding up.
So if we went through with the PE phase and say for some reason we got slowed up, does that mean we have to start the process over again? Do we have to find those funds for the PE again, like for this to just get pushed back, or does that not matter? Does that not matter?
PE phase and we didn't move forward.
And say we came
yeah.
back like 2050, like it was basically a start over. Right?
Elements you may not have to, and then Sam maybe speak to the elements you would not have to, but I'll let Sam maybe answer that one.
Right, well, if we were able to complete the PE phase, say on segments 1 and 2, there are certain things that we would need to revisit. Like survey as an example, double checking that all property boundaries are still what they are today, or if we're talking about between now and 2050 as an example, sometimes property boundaries change, but also the condition of the road, or maybe if the water main is good today, but the water main is not good in 2050, then now we need a new water main. Those sorts of things. So it's more of like the plans themselves that are developed should be good. It's just going back to it again, making sure does it still make sense for us in 2050, if that makes sense.
Every couple of years we're submitting projects and change rules. So there's gonna be rules, we have to go back and reset specifications, or different things will come up. Maybe the current pole we put it for a signal is no longer valid anymore, we're gonna get different poles. So there's all these changes and specifications that occur as we go as well, that will have to be updated. So we don't have to throw the whole thing out, but there's gonna be a significant amount of work to pull it off the shelf.
Stormwater standards is a good example, right? A lot of people talk about, especially every rain event, everybody's talking about the rain and the flooded areas, right? Stormwater standards could be an easy one that changes between now and 2050, right? People are already talking about it now, in general, so that would be an easy one that who knows what those standards look like at that time.
I have a couple questions. The first, from Lathrop's point of view, I think if you look at the master plan or previous talks about this, it's sort of important, or at least it makes contiguous sense for our city to have both 2 and 3 segments, right? To go all the way up to 12 mile. Can you talk about the risk, and when you divide it up, I understand there's an opportunity here to move faster. Is there a risk that we end up boulevarding, up to 11 mile, and then because they're not the same project, that you could actually be turned down or not be able to do the rest of that project?
Yes, there's absolute risk. There's risk in, we'll be breaking even segment 1 and 2 up when we do it in construction. That something could happen between just getting the 696 part done or something. We don't know what the future looks like, right? The funding, it's hard to say. Now, if we get the project, if we get project 1 and 2 done, the likelihood of 3 getting done is improved because you've got them done. It's easier. That next step is that way smaller to move on. So it certainly improves opportunity, and people see the need for it. They can say, hey, we just need to go this much farther. It makes sense, type of thing. Sometimes more things get done, but there's no way to guarantee it. There's definitely not.
My other question is looking at the purpose of the project from your standpoint. Can you point? I can think of a number of boulevarded communities, and they're all very different. Can you? Think of a community that has a project similar to this, and that's trying to achieve these goals and goes to the same sort of area.
Our most recent ones would probably be we're gonna have one going in Novi and 12 Mile Road west of Novi Road to I-96. That's gonna be a large one there that is similar. I would say the good thing with that one is it's not as developed along that corridor as this one is.
Right.
The other corridor we did, Baldwin Road north of I-75, that one had more development along that corridor, but it was a highly transitional development area. They were really, a lot of places have redeveloped since and continue, and there were properties that were vacant because the road was in such bad shape. Now that they're starting to develop the areas around it. We haven't done it to Boulevard, it's something developed to this extent, and I can't remember what was last time, maybe it's Troy.
Evergreen, right?
What?
Did you guys do Evergreen?
We did not do it.
We didn't do it.
That was a city.
Evergreen doesn't really look like Southfield for the most part. Except for the Civic Center. It reminds me a little bit of Ferndale, but I know that's been boulevarded forever.
Yeah.
In terms of the impact that has on traffic and congestion, would that be a fair comparison, or are they really just apples and oranges?
They're similar. I guess that's a state route. I think a state route has a lot more I argue you're gonna get a lot more stuff from freeways and trucks beyond what we typically see here in this area, but, otherwise, it's highly developed area of the boulevard, yeah, it's one, from that perspective, an area you wanna see that has continued to, I think the boulevard does look good down there to keep the community, makes it look nice through there.
Clausen has some boulevarded.
That's not our road, but I'm not familiar
Okay.
in Clausen with, on Main Street, I think Livernois maybe, but.
So I'm thinking of, the Livernois in Detroit, and I know that's not you all, but I remember that the Wayne County Commission put in a boulevard from the Lodge to Avon. I think it's Lodge. There might be other, but they took it out because it was not working, whatever. And so that's where, my concern gets in that, we pay it and then, and I don't know the total reason why they took it out, but I know it's gone now. So, do you know anything about that?
I can't speak to that at all, only that from our position, we've never taken one out.
Okay. And then my other question is, so you're saying you're gonna add a lane on both sides of Southfield, or just one lane, or we just gonna stay with
Well,
the four?
south of 686, northbound is 3 lanes right now. That'll stay that way. South of 696 is a small stretch. Southbound, that is 2 lanes. It goes from 3 to 2 in that area. So it's be a consistent 3 lanes there. North of 696 is 5 lanes or 2 lanes in each direction. It'll still be that way north of 696. We won't be adding any through lanes.
So you won't be taking any of the land away from the
Oh,
property?
we will. That's where the median comes from. The median will push everything out. The Central Boulevard is what pushes everything out. So yes, this job is there's a lot of right of way involved.
So the people that have parking that's in front, like at the corner of 12 and Southfield, they'll be taking away some of their parking. Well, it's not parking, but it's now, what I'm thinking of specifically, thank you all for talking for me, is the one at the corner that there is the in front of Danny's. It's just a what is it, like a median or something like that. Would that be taken away from, and vice versa, going along? So they don't lose
The
something.
detail, we don't get into detailed designs
No.
like that at this level. They look at the impacts to those businesses in general. How much, is it a total take, a partial take? Is there writing, is there parking issues associated with it? Part of EA, there's a tremendous amount of parking that's looked at heavily up and down the corridor. A lot of parking is going on within the right of way right now. And there's a lot of looking, how to address those parking needs. And so, yeah, they probably want to get into that. But that was a heavy look at through the EA and the impacts to those businesses and the parking. And then working with Blaker Village and how to manage those changes.
And we produced the park
The
mitigation.
park mitigation plan that was put in the EA, right?
That was 2017, we identified some of the key parcels that we knew would be either partial or a couple of the total takings. Based on, they would lose. And that was that was one thing that was requested, that we implement that to move this assessment along at that point. That's when the council came up with the idea of using vacant parcels adjacent to commercial for parking as a special use. Similar to this property down here, which is one that would lose most, if not all, of the parking in the front. They have a vacant lot that's residential, and we change our ordinance to allow that could be developed for parking.
If I remember correctly, it's been a while, but I think we were came up 8 to 10 spots short in terms of the total mitigation. Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly, but I know that what we came up with was sufficient at the time
Right,
for,
for the EA,
to
yeah.
satisfy the EA, but I think there were still some gaps.
And what did the business's response out of it?
From my recollection, there were some that had gotten notice, and I think there was panic initially because they thought it was coming right away and that they were losing parking, but I don't know that there was they were invited to
stakeholders in the district who expressed their concern. I don't know that we got a whole lot of feedback one way or the other from the then property owners. A lot of that's changed in the sense of
You guys, I don't know if I missed it. You guys do a study on what the speed limit would change to, or would it change, or would it stay the same?
The state police sets the state speed limits on our behalf. We work with them, so we can't set a speed limit until after the court open in.
So when this first was started, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought this was to slow down traffic for Lakewood.
that was part of the hope. Remember we had, Dan Brundon came in and gave a presentation about road diets and the effect of, and then at that point there were 3 or 4 different possible alternatives that we were working with. Some of those had on-street parking and did contemplate, I think it was 35-hour speed limit. I don't believe any of those, you could probably, I don't believe any of those alternatives moved forward. The one that moved forward was keep the, as you indicated, 2 lanes of traffic with just the median and on-street parking.
Were we the ones who changed it based on our master plan back in 2014?
Yeah, that
Well,
we were,
ready to go.
because I think the initial plan didn't, there wasn't a key in what the proposed, and we were, part of our master planning process was that we were, at the time, trying to slow traffic, creating more of a downtown village center. And so, yeah, we did push hard for those alternatives. That's something that Nicholas would put us on, jail specifically, that's where we came up. I think there were 4 different proposed alternatives, and this one here is the one that was settled on. Again, it didn't include that on-street parking.
That's not one trying to slow down the traffic. It's still under.
Anything else? Any other questions?
So, last thing, with the PE, so if you do the resolution, basically you're saying we'll just have, during that time period, we'll work on our funding. But you're not, would you have to do another resolution for the actual phase where we're spending the 3.75?
Part of that 375 is the PE in there, so that'd be, that number would be lower than that, but, this is just for the preliminary engineering. Any other phase we move on, we do another local agreement with each local agency at that point in time, and before we move on to the next phase. That would lay out the funding again for that particular phase.
So this would be something we will directly decide on next month. January 6th was your deadline?
So December 5th, the intent, plan as of right now would be December 15th, we'll have this on study session again, continued discussion, and there will be an action item on the agenda for you guys to consider.
Got a real quick question, just that 377, that's available in reserve tri-party funds. Can somebody just speak to what is our access to that money generally? I mean, is it pretty much only for projects like this?
Touch on how tri-party funding works. Sure. I'm trying to look at numbers now for your history. It's been a while since you've utilized it. So the last time this last year actually, used it for Southfield Road. What was it?
Repaving.
Repaving there. So you can use it towards that. So basically projects for tri-party or for road resurfacing, reconstructing, and drainage improvements, signal installation, curb and lane additions, shoulder paving, things like that. A lot of communities utilize that for. In the past, in the breakdown that we have there, you've done it with Southfield Road in 2019, 2024, and of course back in 2002 and 98. So you can see some of these things what you utilize it for. So the money's been sitting there and it's available for these things. It will continue to sit there as your money that you can utilize as you see fit for any of these cost share agreements that we have for roads that come through your communities.
Just to be clear, it's a prioritize a third, a third, a third.
Yeah.
The road commission's third and the county's third is a pot of money sitting there waiting to be used. Your third, we don't know if you go by year, you say use it, or you don't have it at all. That's completely up to the local agency to supply that one third, how they do it. But the other 2/3 is sitting in a pot, essentially waiting to be spent.
So next year, you'll start 2026, you'll get a notice from our office stating that your new amount that you'll have most likely is like $400,000 available because it's adding in the 40,000 that is, estimated around that benefit.
Of which we have to come up with a third if we don't have it already.
Right.
Right.
But we dictate, assuming it fits the parameters of the money, we dictate what project it would go to.
Yes, it is up to the local agency to decide on the project.
Because you could decide as well that you want to bring out of your own coffers and say that you want to just split your own communities of that for as well, or take one more.
So obviously there's an opportunity cost if we use this money for other future major road projects.
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking too is just trying to think creatively. I mean, this is something we could also go to the DDA for because the DDA is a big interest obviously in South Florida, that's why they exist. And for a long time they were spending maybe their balance because they were saving it for an eventual boulevard project where we're going to have the need for funds. So that could be an opportunity to lower some of the costs as well. So something we can talk about next month.
And that's very common amongst other local agencies use PDA funds to pay their portion. It's very common.
Thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. If you have any questions, let's reach out to us. We'll get you an answer for sure. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on next to council committees and liaison assignments. Obviously, we review those every couple of years. I know we've got some people in positions currently. I think people can either stay or we could rotate them, depending on what makes best sense for the city. We've got the DDA, but from the charter perspective, the mayor sits on that, and then hopefully you'll do the backup like we did the last couple of years. Got the planning commission, Southfield Local Schools, Parks and Rec, and Tree. And before we get into the discussion of it, just a couple of thoughts on some of these. Kelly had a great idea about adding a liaison for the Southfield Chamber, so that we have a liaison to funnel opportunities back and forth between the chamber and the council, as well as keeping the city and the council appraised of what's going on in the business community. So that's one thing I think we can discuss. Another idea she had was combining the tree and the recreation committee, so that we can talk about the pros and cons of that. And then third idea, this kind of came back in late 2023. Three of us may remember Charles Hall put together a proposal for an inclusivity committee, which was basically the idea behind that was to make communication accessible to people who are hearing impaired, visually impaired, colorblind, things like that, across all of our different communication methods. And we kind of dropped the ball on that, and we kind of brought it back up in April. We talked it again. Jason was starting to brush up his communication plan, and wanted to reach out to Mike about reaching out to Charles again for that inclusivity. And as I thought about it, I thought maybe this might be a good time to create another committee for communication and engagement. And that would be overarching, would include the communication plan that we've been kind of slowly working on. We could bring in, the inclusivity aspect of it, and then we can work on communication engagement. And I said communication engagement because, we do have, we can always improve our communication, but we always have a problem with getting community engagement in a lot of the things that we're doing. So I think, in addition to talking about who's gonna do what on the roles, I think, it might make sense to have a conversation about those three things to see whether or not, there's any appetite to create some new positions or combine both together.
I think combining the tree committee and Parks and Rec committee, it sounds convenient. I'm not sure
that was my concern, when Kelly first approached the subject, my gut reaction was, oh, hey, that's a good idea. And the more I thought about it, it's exactly that, are the tree are the tree committee members going to, want to be planning events, and are the event people going to be want to be working on trees? And obviously the committee is tasked with maintaining the greenscape, and if we pull them onto events, that may pull them away from that, and vice versa. So I don't know. I mean, what were your thoughts then? What was your suggestion?
Seeing about it was more about funding more than anything else, seeing that they're not going to be getting funding, and that them together to figure out a way to keep both the tree committee afloat and the Parks and Rec committee together afloat, and they do partner on some things, and so that was my thoughts, more or less about funding.
So they could be essentially together, but they're still working on their respective interests, right?
I mean, it's not something that would be disruptive to either. They've already worked together on things instead of one having a meeting one day, someone else having a meeting another day, they come together and they meet at the same time, and they can, to me, they would be able to assist each other because it is parks, and then rec, and then trees, parks.
The feeling I got from the park and rec people right now is, the hard part is between parks and events, and they seem to be, depending on what it was, I won't say resenting, but like struggling with the two sort of opposite, not opposite, but, they're not necessarily, in concert, and whereas trees and parks there is overlap there. The outside maintaining the parks, that type of thing versus the events, which then that's the fundraising. So I know they're all intertwined, but it did seem like there was some question about roles that maybe we could look at across the board with these two. Or I'm just calling them three, but they really are kind of three rather than two.
Yeah, I think there's definitely overlap between the parks and the tree committee, but the tree committee also has a much broader,
Right.
purview.
Yeah.
Which is not just the parks, I mean,
Right.
it's supposed to be trees for the whole city. So, yeah. So, are you thinking that they would have one pot of money associated with them, and then they would have to basically battle it out for the funds, or how are you thinking that would work?
Well, Parks and Rec gets no money right now, right? What do we do?
Tree committee, Parks and Rec gets assigned like $20,000 a year.
Yeah, basically, putting them together. To help and also because Parks and Rec is losing people, tree committee seems very stable compared to all of them, and you still now have, which you still have children's garden that you're at work, but I'm not keeping that up, I really don't think that DPS is gonna be able to, control that and maintain that, there's no way that they would be able to.
So if we did combine these guys, that's something we'd have to do.
Yeah, I'm recommending just keep creating a new community, resolving the two.
And so is that something we can decide here, or would we have to actually put together a resolution and
I would make it a formal
action? Yeah. So do we want to put that on as an action item for December?
Sure.
So are we, so if you combine what John said, the three, would it be in the name, or is it just Parks and Rec?
I'm sure you.
So we,
I don't think it'd be in the name.
about the thought about having a Lathrop Village Chamber representative. I did reach out to the chamber, and they thought it was a good idea.
You said Southfield Chamber the first time.
Oh, did I? I meant, if I did say that, I meant Lathrop Village. Lathrop Village Chamber.
See, I thought it was a great idea.
It was a great. I think it was a great
Best
idea.
idea.
Yeah.
It was more or less not just for the Lakewood Village Chamber, but it was where to build relationships between the council and the businesses. And I think that just from some of the businesses I have talked to, it is not.
Not as good as it could be.
And,
Is that not the role that we do in liaison with the DDA?
No, so the DBA, so the city mayor sits on as an actual
Yeah.
voting member of the DBA. The DBA is meant to foster the DBA district, which includes the businesses, obviously. And obviously we have business members who comprise the board, but I think the chamber kind of has a little bit of a different feel to it, more like a, industry group kind of. I'm blanking on the word, but.
Lobbying. They're a lobbying group.
Yeah.
I mean, they are, right? I don't know.
a lobbying group?
Yeah.
Google it.
I would say no, because I think that they are more supportive of all businesses. They're not trying to, direct it in any one type of,
Nope.
direction. I think that.
They're not advocating for a single business, they're advocating for the whole business community.
Business community.
They're in membership,
And then how about, with the, communication and engagement?
What? I'm sorry.
What's that?
I'm sorry. What did you say? I'm sorry.
What about, establishing a committee for communication and engagement?
I like that.
Yeah.
I think it's stretching us thin on all the things that we're doing, and I think that communication kind of goes with every single committee that we already have. In a way, and I think that that is all of our responsibility as elected officials to have the communication. Now, one thing that I would say is what we also talked about is having the quad captains.
Mhm.
But I think that would be more, that's a way to do communication, but it's not led by us, that would be through for each quad to be led. So if that's what you're talking about.
No, I was thinking more of just and I was brainstorming, I think it was more of like a committee just to ensure that we're most effectively communicating with the residents, finding the ways to get them to engage. And that could be part of it, or that, if we don't do a communication committee, we could sponsor something like that and try to get a group like that together.
But you're saying the committee would be comprised of residents?
Mm-hmm. Just like any other committee. It'd be
It
similar.
would be a liaison amongst them.
Right. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud. And actually what we could do is, we could merge those two ideas and have the committee set up so that there was one representative from each quadrant. And there's got the committee and have a council liaison for that. I'm just thinking out loud.
I think there's a lot of work involved in setting up a communication plan that's more effective than what we do now, and if we can put that work in the hands of residents, I think it's a good idea. I don't think we're talking about potentially having more communication with the businesses, but I think the problem really is that, how do we reach the residents? And, the inclusivity also includes people that just aren't on the internet, aren't paying attention. How we get to them.
So the whole thing about the internet, let's talk about that. 98%, is that right? 99.2% of residents in Lakewood Village have.
Oh, I know they have these.
And so, I think that, that's.
Well, it's not effective.
And also,
thank you
think
all
that
for
we
coming
also need
tonight.
to
I know
remember-
every single one of you that was gonna be here. It's a challenge that we're seeing over and over again, that we're just not, having enough to engage, because you said not just communication, but engagement. So let's ask the residents what we can do to better reach them, better engage them.
I think we also need to remember that our business, community also pays taxes here. And I think that is a communication that needs to go from not just the residents, but the business also, and so I think that's still a collective, need across the board, it's not just.
But I don't, I mean, in theory, like, thinking about it, I don't think it's a bad idea to let the residents, like, at least see if they could explore, options, because in theory, the residents are the ones saying that there's, a lack of communication, so if they could, solve.
I think another benefit too could be, it does put the focus on the communication plan, because we've been trying to get that developed for how many years now, and we just haven't.
Pretty soon.
What's that?
Pretty soon.
Yeah, pre-Susan, yeah. Yeah, so it's just that 3-4 years.
And so next, it will be the next, meeting to decide who goes on it.
Yeah, well, I guess what we need to figure out is whether or not we wanna do any of these three, and then, once we do that, I don't think it makes sense to start assigning people to committees until we know how many committees we have.
Create committees, open them up for application, and then in January.
But I'm thinking more from the liaison
Yeah,
perspective.
but if you're creating new committees, then.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it looks like, well, it'd be one new committee would be the communication and engagement, and then I guess we would technically close down the Parks and Rec and the Tree Committee, and then open it back up for,
Do we want feedback from the tree committee? Because they really do have a lot more sort of structure and focus.
yeah, I mean, I don't think that would be a bad idea, getting feedback from the committees to see if they think that could work, since they're the ones that are in the council.
Yeah, as the city administration liaison to the tree committee, it's a pretty self-sustaining group. They kind of have like a really well with one another. They are led by Brandon Min, who's an arborist, certified arborist. He actually just got an award from the National Organization of Arborists for being a young professional. And they don't really need much guidance. And all of their projects have been funded by sponsors. Especially grants for the most part, and then the only funding next year will be coming from the nature group. Liaison Nature Group has donated $1,000 for tree plantings next year. So yeah, just keep that in perspective. Just want to make sure.
Alright, so let me just do a little polling here. So in terms of adding a liaison to the Lakewood Village Chamber of Commerce, for it, against it?
I don't think it's a big deal.
I know you're okay with this, sure, yeah.
I don't see they're gonna reach out to us, that's what they do. Yeah, that's my feeling.
And then thoughts on kind of tabling the combining the two, the tree committee and the Parks and Rec, and to get some input from the others, or do any of you guys have a strong opinion on one way or the other right now?
Is there a way you could, reach out to them, or just meet them?
Yeah, we just
before
met before.
And then like have them like bring their feedback to study session? I mean,
Yeah, I could send an email to them now, but please attend the next study session and discuss future of the committee.
And similarly, we have a Parks and Rec meeting on tomorrow, Thursday. So I can bring that up with
or
Parks
can
and
you
Rec.
ask them to like maybe send like email or something beforehand, but maybe let them get their thoughts out, and then we still listen to them in study session.
Yeah, and ask for the feedback.
Is there still an opening in Parks and Rec?
There is.
How
How many people are on that?
Four residents and one council member.
Okay, and then thoughts on communication and engagement?
I'm for it.
No?
So you have to-
Alright,
It's
so,
gonna sound bad if I say no communication, but they're gonna need direction, which we have not provided the communication in 4 years. So why would you start a committee that you have not completed within the group?
well, that could be one of their tasks, right?
So
Right.
put it off onto another group, who you're supposed to be.
Well, I mean, the
It's fine.
council liaison in there too, so. Okay, so why don't we wait off to assign the, committees until the next study session? So that we can figure out what to do with the tree and, Parks and Rec committee, and then we'll know the total number and see how we can give you that.
Are those the only committees right now?
But I don't think I missed it, did I miss anything? So like the DDA, planning, Southfield Public Schools, Parks and Rec, tree.
DDA is not an option.
Right, well, right, but it's, I said that at the beginning, it's not an option, but, it's still going on all that stuff. And then communication, and then the LV chamber.
So, who's the plan?
Yeah, so, have we been doing SEMCON? We've been going,
That's, Jason.
is it? Okay.
Jason been going to some kind?
Is it?
I don't think so.
I don't think we've got a SEMCON report in a long time, have we?
Seen some notes on it, I get information from it, but
That, the finance committee, that was just pretty.
That was pretty. Yeah, unless anybody sees a need for that to continue on.
Seems like there's gonna be a lot of work ahead of us.
Right, but that, I mean, that's the budget, it's the budget process. Yeah, which requires public hearings and, public input. Okay, anything else on committees? Alright, so library service research update.
Yep, so at council's request, I've reached out to our neighboring communities to see what they do for library services, so this discussion is just essentially giving you guys an update based on our last meeting. I'll continue to update while I get additional information from these communities. But essentially, Beverly Hills contracts with the city of Birmingham. Birmingham charges them $1 million each year, and after it's been rolled back since about the mid-90s when it went into effect. They currently pay roughly $645,000 a year for library services. Pleasant Ridge contracts with Huntington Woods. It costs them about $50,000 a year, but their contract's been in place for over 20 years. Their city manager is really adamant that there's zero chance Huntington Woods will give them that contract now. It's renewed. Their service is also paid by a library millage that's renewed every 5 years, and it's written right in the contract where if the millage ever failed, library services review, and they just go there. Berkeley, I'm working with them. They no longer sell individual cards for library access. I've given them information. I've had a conversation with them today. Given them information, we're going to come up with a rough proposal for us to consider over the next couple weeks. I'll share that with you once I get it. Troy does allow the ability to purchase individual library cards, $200 a year, and the card allows individuals to receive full privileges at Troy Public Library and the rest of the Suburban Library Collective, which is numerous libraries around us. You have full access to their services. Southfield. So they did start their discussion at their library board at their November meeting. They're gathering more information about both questions, so whether we can cancel early and whether they'll sell individual cards. My contact at the library will give me information once they have more. I also reached out to Birmingham. They gave us a rough estimate based on what their current costs are with their current contracted library folks. The cheapest it looks like they would start would be $240,000 a year. So that's where we're at with.
Which explains why Southfield's always asking us for more. Because we've got a 50-year deal, we got a good deal.
So technically, the residents can go to Troy and get a membership, and they still will be able to use Southfield.
Yes, double check the Suburban Collective grouping. I believe Southfield's on there. If not, one of our neighbors is where that's the other issue.
Did they say when they would be getting back to you on answering those questions, or just?
Southfield. They can make it very generalized right now.
When's the board?
They had one mid-November, when they first discussed it, so they had it before our last study session. I gotta look when their December one is.
So, got a little more information to come. And again, I mean, I know there was potentially up to a year lead time, but I mean, realistically, we still have probably a couple months before we come to a final decision. I mean, given the
up to you.
budget process, right?
Yeah, and realistically, it's up to what Southfield says. If they say a year, then we have to look at the review.
Right.
Your paper. So, yeah, that's gonna be a big sticking point when I get feedback from them regarding that.
Right, so, no action items until we hear back from Southfield.
Oh, there could be an action.
Well, there could be, but it makes sense to wait to hear what they have to say.
It looks like the South is having that, in the collector cooperative.
Who's
Yeah.
the closest that's closest to us?
Not Berkeley. These all look like they're in a.
A lot more on my phone.
Yeah.
A couple.
Yeah, like Detroit. Might be the closest.
So a workaround, but not the greatest workaround. Anything else on the library? Okay, administration relations office.
Yep, so this, I just wanted to share some information with council. Naturally, employee salary and benefits are a constant talking point among the public, especially during budget process and regarding our finances. So I wanted to share with you information that comes directly from them on where Laker Village relates to essentially everyone else. Manager, I put in, I'm biased with this. I'm gonna do what I can to protect my staff. We have to completely understand everything's on the table, but from staff's perspective, make sure we need to know sooner rather than later, just like everything else. But just going through that, in your pack also, there's MML Municipal Benefit Summary. So MML does a survey every single year to get feedback from their members, just so they can put reports like this together and do some comparisons. So essentially, paid time off averages, outside of holidays, the city is relatively in line with everyone. Our holidays also include employees' birthday, which is a benefit, and then naturally we have holidays like MLK Day and Indigenous People Day that some other communities don't have. So that's one reason that I'm doing that. But we also cap our paid time off at 20 days, where some other communities, after longer you stay there, you start getting that 25-day mark. Insurance benefits, we're right in line with the majority of communities where we require employees to pay 20% of their healthcare premium. But I know that doesn't cover what type of insurance we get. As council is aware, the city has had to scale back administrative insurance coverage over the years, so we're currently in the Blue Care Network HMO, which is a relatively cheap insurance plan. And speaking of insurance, if an employee opts out of insurance, we do give them a payment. Overall, this is a savings for the city manager. So when opts out of insurance, we just send them a check. We're going to net positive on that. Average opt out, it's just over 3,100. We only offer 3,000. Dental and vision, we're in line with everyone else where we provide employee paid dental and vision. These are relatively minor costs for the city. Retiree health insurance, well, we don't provide true retiree health insurance as in the past. We do offer retiree health savings plans, so we do, for administrative employees, we do contribute 2% every single year to our adjustment. And speaking of retirement savings, we are on the lower end of the bell curve for contributions, specifically for the administrative employees. The police, after this sticking point with their negotiations every single year, so they are going to be on the higher end. This is pretty standard in most municipalities, or basically a little bit higher. But the city essentially offers 5% match. So that's where we are right now. And then for salaries, I know this is always a talking point too. We mentioned a lot during finance review committee and presentations, everything like that. Naturally, the industry's gotten a lot more competitive. So just from that standpoint, I want to share with you guys just after the MML survey of city administrator salaries compared to our region. Naturally, that's where Laker Village is recruiting from for the most part. And then just wanted to share some open positions that these are the salaries that for this position, actually, this kind of mirrors every other position. So we do it through, we do move the staff or recruit people, we are going to start paying a premium. That's how it is.
thought you were gonna say if I leave. She won't let you do it.
Yeah, I just want to share this information, answer any questions you guys have, because as we know, it gets talked about all the time, but from my standpoint, Lathrop Village does not seem out of the ordinary at all.
Doesn't the MNL also do like a salary survey in terms of?
That's in the very back, I just put the administrative one, just for comparison's sake.
Right, but yeah, it's in. Did I have it all? Oh no, this was for the city manager role.
Yeah.
But don't they do it for like city clerk and other? Have you looked at how in line we are?
Yeah,
Because I know we did a salary review. What was it? Can I remember like 4 or 5 years ago? I think the last time we did it. Maybe further than that.
If anything, Michelle's, we're paying a premium for, we know that, everyone else is relative. Cause yeah, it is that weird thing, especially when you're looking at the SEMCOG communities, Metro Netherlands, you see it covers everything from Ann Arbor down to the small communities of like 600 people. So, in the other part, like, they have part of survey, some people that take it, so I know there's a bunch of like, some of our neighbors in there that are included. But for the most part, public fantasy, we're relatively in good shape in terms of salaries, but
Comments, thoughts?
I know the right line. You don't know what I see why they have theirs high, but a lot of issues.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate, like, I think I emailed you, I appreciate you putting this together because, I mean, the staff just get bashed right now. And with the exception of, like you said, is the holidays, and we're a little heavy on the holidays, but, because you noted in the memo, that's not a cost, it's we pay for it anyways, more of an opportunity cost, but,
And staff is gonna be staying, are they getting an increase this year? I read something that they had a 7%.
Yeah, I don't know where people are getting that number from, because that never happened. The budget for salaries, the one line item went up 7% year over year, because it included a massive payout for a former employee. Since I've been here, administrative staff have gotten 2% and 3%. Yeah.
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, so this is more information sharing, naturally, there's no action item or feedback needed, this we discuss more during the budget process, but.
So technically, we lost you, just saying technically, that we would have to go up another, $20,000 just to be competitive.
Based on my friends that are recruiters, I have a feeling if I left your salary range back to 120 to 140 a check. For example, full disclosure, I was a finalist for Chelsea before I came here. Their salary range at that point, I believe, was 120 to 140, and that was 2.5 years ago. They had council turnover and manager left. I don't know why, but now they're offering 160. So that's the tough market, and especially with city managers, they're becoming less and less. Especially as people are, especially with clerks, pretty much everyone has been municipal government. It's less and less, it's harder to find talented people, or you're taking the risk and you're training people like we do with police, and I think that's turned out good so far. So.
I mean, we do have to take into account how much taxes would go up, and so like Chelsea collects considerably more than we do. So, we can always go head to head with everybody.
No, and that's why it's a good point brought up, because it is comparison sake, and you gotta take all the considerations. And you can do the same thing both ways. For example, Pleasant Ridge taxable is less than us, but their manager gets paid $150,000 a year. So it's that give and take when you're trying to attract folks.
But good chart, I like it, and I appreciate you putting it together. If we could get at some point a few of the other positions.
Yeah, we can share with that. The one thing we consider the reason, besides me just, I can defend myself with this, every other position, it's really hard to go apples to apples. Because, for example, what we have deputy treasurer, if I pulled the report, it's just gonna say deputy treasurer, we're probably like 15 within SEMCOG. But she doesn't do just deputy treasurer things, it's everything else that you're trying to essentially combine 3 positions into one with just a. But
Yeah.
we can share it, it's just that's the context that needs
Those
to be.
kind of notes are useful. So.
Yeah, that's just the kind of context you guys need to understand, and then naturally we put that out there, public can see it, someone's gonna be advantage, why is this person being paid this much? Well, they do X, Y, Z, what you think they do pay.
I mean, I understand this is not comfortable. but asking the question's not necessarily bashing, and if it is, it shouldn't be bashing, but it's just, the questions are fine.
Yeah, absolutely. If anything, from my standpoint, it's an approach from people.
Well, I think that's probably right, but I think, the questions are good, and then it gives you also an opportunity to respond and say, well, this is what this person does, and I think that's the kind of communication that is helpful to everybody. Maybe that quote-unquote passion would go down with some understanding. Or it wouldn't, because who knows, but you gotta, that would be great. Thanks.
Didn't we work on some kind of, I think it was like an org chart of like what everybody does, or did that never?
We have job descriptions.
I thought, or was that Sue?
That was a Susan task as well, creating the delegation.
We were trying to figure out like what does everyone do for sure. So when you're saying like our deputy treasurer does A, B, and C, everyone knows she does A, B, and C, and not just A. So that never happened.
You also have, I mean, a lot of these other communities, they may have a treasurer, but then they have 3 or 4 people working in the treasury department, or a clerk with 3 or 4 people working in the clerk's department. Nathan's never had that luxury of having, multiple people underneath just the top position.
Any other comments? Great, thanks again for doing that, Mike, appreciate it. Alright, so we will move on to public comments, 3 minutes for the residents who would like to address council.
Quick quiz. It's been a while since I've been here, so congratulations to the new members. Anyway, a couple things in no particular order. What happens to all the work that's been done on Southfield Road already? All the new paving and everything else, all the infrastructure, if they do this boulevard. The hawk signals, what happens with those? Why is it stopping at 13 Mile and not going boulevard all the way to 14 Mile where Southfield ends at that point? No, I'm sorry. Anyway, thinking of the wrong road. What is the ultimate goal of the boulevard? Is it traffic control? Is it to make something more usable? I think that's a question that needs to be asked. More mundane. Who's responsible for shoveling the snow on the sidewalks around the park? Out back here. Just took a walk and they hadn't been shoveled. I was trudging over ice. You mentioned the communication plan. I thought Jason was working on a communication plan, and that was supposed to be ready at some point in time previously. I think from what he was saying, that would have answered some of the questions that had been asked. I think you're talking about council liaisons to all these committees. You guys spend a whole lot of time doing your jobs as it is right now. Okay, I think it would save you a whole lot of time and heartache if there was no liaison, but you had the committee chair report to city council. Okay, that way you don't have to spend another day, another evening attending meetings. You can spend it with the families or doing council stuff as opposed to having to spend time with these different committees. That also gets these committees to be a little bit more independent, and they don't have somebody looking over their shoulder. I'm sure, just like if the teacher's responsible, if the teacher's at some meeting, all the students are looking at the teacher for their response. Are we saying something that they're not liking? I think that's a possibility. Whereas if you're not there, you might get some more independent thinking. Okay, councilperson or some representative for every quad in the city. Might we be talking about going, rather than having council at large, having a council person from each quad, or something along those lines? Just another thought. Staff working. Part of Mike's memo was having staff.
So it was good timing to have this discussion about this long-term potential plan for Southfield Road. Something I've been thinking about and just noticing lately that I intend to bring before the planning commission, and maybe the long-term plan addresses this. I think maybe it does, because it kind of sounds like it eliminates some or all of the front parking on businesses on Southfield Road. They would have to park in the back. But one thing I've been noticing lately is how dangerous the mid-block entrances and exits are on Southfield Road. There's no real reason for them. And I don't know if this has ever come up before. I've only been here for a couple of years. But in other words, most of them go out to the adjacent side streets, right? You go out there and then exit, get onto or out, in and out through the adjacent side street. But a lot of them have these mid-block, one or two, I don't know if there are any three, these mid-block entrances and exits. So drivers on Southfield are being surprised by people. A good example is the Papa's Pizza, the Pizza Fest, right? They're coming out mid-block, and you may have cars lined up, two, three, four, as many as four, because they might be entering and exiting through the side street. So that's something to keep in mind as you talk about this plan. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Anyone else?
Good evening, Tim Holman, San Quentin Boulevard. Rick, thank you for your question about why this project won't extend north of 13 Mile. I also thought about that myself. I wondered perhaps because of the cemetery's presence there, but I also wonder perhaps if it might have something to do with the NIMBY of it all, and people north of 14 might not want a large road in their community, and therefore they get to not have one. But I'd be curious to know what the real answer is. On the topic of libraries, I don't think it'll work to just ask residents to pay for a Troy library card. It's too far away. It's really not close to Lathrop Village at all, and it's not part of the network that so many local libraries are. I know we've already reached out to Berkeley, Birmingham, and Huntington Woods, but I want to offer a few more alternatives to contact. Royal Oak is part of that network. Bloomfield is part of that network. Oak Park, Ferndale, and Franklin are part of that network. A little bit further out, it's still relatively close. We have Clawson, Hazel Park, and Madison Heights as part of that network. So Oak Park especially, given its proximity to us, but certainly Royal Oak and Ferndale I think should be high on the list of people we consult. I don't think I said Franklin, but Franklin also has a library. They also have a very small population, and they might appreciate an opportunity to add some more taxpayers to their roster. So perhaps the Village of Franklin as well. That's all I got. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Two other things.
No. Okay, we'll close council comments just to address a couple of things. Reasons for the project, I mean, I think the road commission crew kind of outlined them on page 3 of the presentation for improving congestion, future traffic operations, safety, aesthetics, connectivity and safety, and so on. It's all in the presentation there. As far as the hawk signals, Mike, do you know what happens with the hawk signals?
That'd be part of preliminary engineering, I think. So another question that was discussed was, hey, for discovery switchers, you gotta remember realistically, construction for this project wouldn't happen 7, 8 years down the road. At that point, you're already looking at when is this gonna get resurfaced. So if this was happening next year, I would completely agree that that construction would take place like 7+ years down the road. The road's already gonna start deteriorating and getting scheduled for replacement anyways.
Well, that was part of the discussion we had at the time, was, you know, did it make sense to do that, continue the construction as part now. What else, why it ends at 13.5? I have no idea, you know, when you were
That's
on
always,
the
I mean, that's
discussion.
always been what they proposed, and I pulled up some of the notes on this, so I don't know why I didn't extend on that. To answer Jonathan's question about the mid-road access points, that was one of the proposed alternatives. So when AFib got involved with this in 2009, it was, at the time, we were doing our master planning, and what the road commission had intended was more of a 4-lane, just get traffic through this area as fast as possible. There were limited turnarounds, if you remember, limited access for buildings. So we as part of, the city as part of the master planning process, you know, asked them to hit the brakes and consider alternatives. One of which alternative was to have some, similar to what Orchard Loop has, where you have like a 1-lane road on either side, so businesses come out and they come out. That plan was rejected by the commission. Yeah, I have no history on why the road project ended there, so.
It looks like, because that's no longer county jurisdiction, that road after 14 miles southward becomes Birmingham.
After Beverly.
Yeah, so it goes to Beverly.
Beverly is in
Beverly is here.
13.5.
That's a good guess.
Yeah, but I just pulled from it. 14 miles becomes Birmingham.
Yeah, and then could we look at some of those other map-based systems that Tim suggested, if you haven't already? And then just in terms of only council comment, I have just a reminder that Friday we have Winterfest from 6 to 8 at City Hall. So there'll be photos of Santa, cookie decorating,
Ornament making.
ornament making.
We're gonna have cocoa, and Boys Men's Club's bringing the dry lemonade truck, and then we'll also have tree lighting. Okay.
From the tree committee, I think we can and should work together on different projects, but I would prefer separate meetings, example planning, arbor and Earth Day together. Tree focuses so exclusively on trees, I don't see it as being productive to combine the meetings. P and R has much broader interest in classes and events. It would make meetings too long. Next person says, I totally agree with that direction that was outlined. When there is overlap, we definitely can combine forces and work together, but to merge both groups together all the time, I know I'm not interested in that direction.
Yeah, it takes quite a passion though for the tree committee.
Yeah. Well, now you actually heard from me, so it's on something.
From who?
Council member at large, Rick, are you saying in the fact of voting, that's the way we vote, or, I didn't understand what your question was with that.
Oh, you mean the liaison?
No, you said council member at large for like the
Okay.
spots.
Well, right now you're council at large. I mean, you represent the whole city.
Right.
Okay, another way would be almost like the Chicago ward system. You represent quad 1, you represent quad 2, somebody represents each quad. Or the representative from that quad becomes a council person. But I mean, that's a whole nother, that would probably be a charter revision and
Okay,
everything
so
else. I mean,
that
that's
was my
just
question, was it,
yeah.
you're talking about getting a charter change where you are voting
possibly.
for
I mean,
each.
that's one end of it.
Okay. And then just tripling down on what I said before, and I agree with Rick, go write that down. That, yes, we were working on a communication plan, and I think that we need to finish it out before, I mean, to me, it'll be the same situation that happened with the Parks and Rec, where they got upset and gave them no direction. We had them, go at it, and we didn't have anything written out.
size of the park and rec is set, or if that was something that maybe we could consider, given the fact that they seem strained by both the event planning and other related things. Could we grow the size of that and add a couple more committee members? I haven't been here for this communication plan, but it does sound like it's stalled, and I think looking at a different approach to it, where you're asking the people directly, how can you better communicate with you, might paramount to it. So I'm all in favor of that.
And Mike, when's the last time Jason asked you about the communication plan?
I'll have to go back and look. I know one of the aspects we were waiting for additional feedback on the redevelopment ready phase process, as that process ties directly into the communication plan, specifically the public participation section. So I think that portion is wrapped up with MEDC, so we can jump back into our communication plan.
One thing Rick mentioned that I missed in the notes, snow shoveling. DPW does it here on campus, right?
Yeah, that's what it's on.
So
We'll get up.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. We'll adjourn the session. Thank you.
Are you with the paper?
Yeah, today's my first day.
Oh, really? What paper?
Southfield Sun.
Southfield Sun. Oh, great. Cool. What's your name?
McKenna.
McKenna. So you haven't worked there long?
No, today's my first day.
Completely. First day and in a council meeting. Wow. I write the local newsletter.
Newsletter. Okay.
Mm-hmm. He's on the planning commission.
Got it.
He's on the planning commission.
But I have,
Yeah.
I have from time to time, I don't know the guy's name, maybe Autumn does. There was a guy you email if you have like a tip or something about a story. I think it was a guy, it might have been a woman, I don't know. But anyway, would you be the new person to contact for that type of thing?
I
Okay.
thought maybe you worked with Proxmire of the, what's it called? Southfield.
Something.
No, Macomb. No. All right, I forget. Oakland Times. That's it. Oakland Times. Yeah. Okay. Well, nice to meet you,
Do you
McKenna.
have a business partner?
No.
No? Okay,
Not
first
yet.
day. Maybe
Sorry.
when after their permit.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice.